Thank you for viewing this RFID Community Connect video from AIM. AIM is an industry association for automatic identification technologies. It's not only RFID, but barcoding, IoT, or any other technologies that automatically identify and capture data. If you want to learn more about AIM, go to aimglobal.org or reach out to us to set up a one-on-one call where we can tell you a little bit more about how AIM can benefit your business.
So I would like to introduce our next speakers. They have a couple fun little videos in here. And again, hopefully they work perfectly for us, as I tested that a few times. It's going to be based on RFID in challenging packaging. So practical lessons for bottle digitalization. We have Paul Whitney, who's the COO and Vice President of AsReader. And we also have Lou Parker joining us, who's the RFID Market Manager for packaging for Checkpoint Systems.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Are you able to hear us or see us? Excellent.
I do hear you guys, yes.
Great.
All right.
Well, so yeah, thank you. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Michael. We'll just review the agenda real quick. So we're going to be focusing today on, as Michael said, the bottle tagging and scanning dilemmas around that. And bottles present some unique challenges, as you see here, both because of the potential contents of that bottle and also due to the fact that the shape of it, the dimensions of it, how it's produced. It may be that it's metallic in nature, either it's purely a metallic bottle, or it may have foil or metallic kind of context to it that may prevent or certainly limit the ability to simply apply an RFID label to it. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those challenges and why those are challenges, and then propose and then present one of the solutions that are to kind of address that and get around that. And then Paul here will get into the workflows.
We'll walk through a few real world use cases where you can see how we can read just one at a time instead of being confused by reading more than one. Also being able to read even metallic objects without getting the reflections from the RFID reader, and then reading cartons without reading what's inside the carton. So we'll play a few videos of that in a warehouse for you later. Next slide, please, Michael.
Right. So one of the challenges I mentioned there in the agenda is the fact of two things: what's contained inside of the product, and then the product itself. So let's look first at an example of what's inside of the product. And if we'll play the illustration here, it kind of gives you a good idea of what I'm talking about. Is it playing? So we see here that there's some liquid inside of the bottles, and one of the ways that we've addressed this, and still do in some cases, is simply embed the RFID inlay into that package label itself, and that can work fine for some use cases. But in other use cases, you really need to get above that fill line, that liquid fill line, because again, that liquid may have metallic flake in it. It may just be really dense. It may be lotions instead of liquid, which again tend to block or absorb that RFID signals, which in turn then really limits or even reduces or just basically it renders that RFID label unreadable, which doesn't really help, obviously, for shelf inventory and such. So by getting up above that shelf label, above that fill line, it really enables that scan to be effective.
Go ahead and give us the next slide there, Michael, if you would.
So the other aspect of this is around the adhesive. So we talked about the packaging itself, and this is still kind of in line with that, as sometimes the packaging, just the geometry of it, the form factor, the shape of it, can cause some problems and some challenges around applying and kind of aftermarket, if you will, RFID label. So we see here, one of the things that we do is I often will walk around inside of retail facilities and different locations and shops, and I always interested to see how well they're doing with their RFID implementation. And over the years, I've kind of built up what I call kind of the hall of shame. So these are some examples of where the RFID label was either not staying adhered or wasn't necessarily placed correctly during the application process. But for some reason, it's been problematic. So we'll see examples here, like in the upper left image, where it's kind of peeling off due to that kind of that curved shape of that pump sprayer on the upper left image there. Sometimes it's an application issue, like we see kind of the upper right and lower left, where either it didn't just get inserted or labeled correctly. There's a little bit of opening, and then two labels got applied to one on the other one. And another example is also down in the lower right, where we see that probably what's happening there is that initially that RFID label actually completely folded around that pump spray cap. But because it's such a tight fit, that adhesive failed and gave way, and it's kind of opened up now. And in fact, at the store itself, I found a number of these kind of laying around the shelf or on the floor, which is really problematic, as you'd imagine, right? You know,
oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You get some tags that just ended up on the shelf because they popped off, and now when you're doing a cycle count, you end up with tags and no product. Definitely not what any of us want to see in the industry. So,
exactly. Yeah. It's even worse when you think you're having this visibility enabled by RFID, and in fact, it can be even more problematic because now you're getting false reads or missing reads that are in fact there.
Definitely. Michael, if you could give us the next slide, we'll start talking about the solutions.
That's right.
Last challenge.
Last challenge. That's right. Well, so lastly, kind of on that, in that same vein of packaging form factors and the challenge with adhesive, if we'll play the little animation here, you can get a better idea of what I'm referring to in the challenge here. So this is an example of a kind of a multivitamin chemical nutraceuticals.
Yeah.
And we see that often these child resistant packaging, we're all pretty familiar with that, where you have to kind of press down to turn, right, or squeeze the cap. And you can certainly go with an RFID label above. That's one way to kind of get above that fill line. That's one solution that the industry has come up with for addressing that issue. And Checkpoint does that as well. But it's challenging on these child resistant, or CR caps, as we call them, because that raised lettering or that raised kind of imaging makes it difficult for that adhesive to get a good adherence to, right? Because it's not a smooth surface. So that can sometimes be a challenge. And we can address that again with a shrink band. And in fact, these over-the-counter pharmacy and nutraceuticals are probably the biggest category that do already leverage. A lot of us are probably familiar with that, where you got to remove the shrink band with that perforation and all that kind of thing. So it's already a packaging that's already out there. It's a packaging approach that's already out there, and now we're kind of RFID enabling that packaging approach.
Right, without having to come up with a whole new tag. You're just using the shrink wrap you've already got on there.
That's right.
That's perfect.
That's right.
If you could give us the next slide there. All right. And would you like to start with the animation, or?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Go ahead and hit that for us there.
That was a little intimation of the approach that we're taking, where we're actually laying the RFID inlay portion of that into a shrink sleeve or shrink band, which is then applied to your product. Again, the same process that packagers are already using today. And this really falls in line with what a lot of retailers are asking for increasingly. They're trying to kind of get away from this, black and white label applied after the fact. Brands aren't really fans of it either, right? They spend a lot of money and a lot of time and effort into presenting their brand with the different, designs and packaging, including their packaging design. Exactly. So then kind of go and slap this, not the most attractive looking plain white vanilla RFID label on it. It doesn't really work very well for a lot of them. It's a bit effective so far, but I think what we're seeing is this, as we continue in this evolution of RFID, is integrating it more and more into the packaging. So this is one example of that. And we'll see a real world kind of, this was some animation, but we'll actually see an example of it actually being applied in the next slide or two here.
Yeah, definitely. Next slide, if you could. Thank you, Michael.
So the last thing I'll touch on here in terms of from the solution aspect is this sustainability aspect of it. So one of the challenges around applying RFID adhesive labels to plastic is that it, there's a lot you need to go through, right, to kind of get approval from APR, the Association of Plastic Recyclers. Is it okay for this to kind of flow into the recycle stream, depending on your region or territory, the country, whatever that you're recycling this in? There's a lot that gets involved in getting that approval for this to flow into that. Or you're relying on the consumer to remove that RFID label so they can then just simply curbside recycle these plastic bottles. The advantage of this is we'll see if we can play the animation. We'll get the concept here that, again, it's a shrink band with the perforation. The consumer needs to remove that shrink band to even consume the product anyway. So it just kind of happens by default, if you will. And then that shrink band, if can potentially be recycled, maybe not curbside, right? We have what's it called here?
Ridwell.
We have a company, Ridwell, we're in the Portland area here.
Yeah. Plastic film recycling, and they'll separate the aluminum there.
That's right. So they can manage that, but at a minimum, at least it's not going into the curbside recycling stream. And the onus isn't so much on the consumer to remove this additional label. It's just removed as part of the consumption of the product.
All right, next slide.
Yeah. So we've talked a bit about the shrink band, and so some of you maybe wonder, like, okay, how do we get started on implementing this? And the answer is it's really similar to how we're doing it. Checkpoint is doing it today, and others for their retail suppliers. Is you submit your product. We'll test it as we see here, like in the we call it anechoic chamber. We'll do some different approaches to what's the best form factor for your shrink band, that both from a form fit, how well does it shrink onto the product and stay adhered to the, stay shrunk onto the product and continue to perform. And then we'll come up with a report, some of what you see kind of this graph here, where that green line is kind of the, kind of the minimum read range performance. This is how the read range over frequency. So we'll look at, depending on if it's in the US or Europe, what have you, we can measure that and see how well that you can read this across those frequency bands.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Michael.
So just in summary of that, again, it's, these are like any of these kind of shrink sleeves or shrink bands. They're custom sizing. They can be made to order for that particular product is being applied to. There's printing of custom printing. It can be clear if that's the preference of the brand or the supplier. It can come pre-encoded or encoded on the line. And again, we'll see an example of line encoding here coming up. And these are we'll use ARC approved inlays, so you'll be immediately compliant with the retail mandate. Easily removable, as we said, it's a perforation on there, some of what we've all experienced with shrink bands in the past, and gives you that secure fit, really snugs on there during the shrinking application of it, and then easily removable with that perforation. So then in addition to RFID, you also get this ability to say if it's been tampered, some tamper evident aspect, right?
All the things. And the great thing is it's what people are already used to. When you have to open one of these type of bottles, everybody's already on board with this, and it's just simply adding the RFID inside that. So that seems like a great solution to me. Next slide, if you could, Michael. So we have some videos here, and this first one, what I'm going to ask you to pay attention to is the sound of the beeps. So one of the challenges with any RFID tag is reading one at a time, and this is going to show how we're using these shrink wrap tags with a glove made by Teijin. It's called a Reco hand. It's recording what the hand does. And you'll see as the finger touches it, it beeps. As it takes it away, it stops. You'll also see a red light light up inside the glove for those loud environments where you can't hear it, but you can see whether or not it's reading. So if you could play the video for us and listen for those beeps.
You can also see the light blinking there.
Yeah. So again, for picking, particularly when you're reaching into a bin with a whole lot of products in there and you're trying to just get one,
right?
This glove has only a 2 centimeter read range, so it allows you to just pick one at a time and not accidentally read the item you're not picking. If you could go ahead and go on to the next slide for us.
And hands-free, right?
Yeah, hands-free. It also, it eliminates that extra step. We're going to actually show an extra step here, but what that showed was grabbing one and reading it as you grab it. Now this is using the same Reco hand from Teijin, but it's what we call the beam type. And this has a beam that's going right in front of the reader there that you can see we've clipped onto a box. Now, this could be on a tripod, it could be mounted permanently, but part of the benefit here is that you can just move it to wherever you need to be. And some of these pack stations can get quite cluttered. But this beam type has a read range that's quite tight. You can adjust it, but this one is set to just a little under a foot. And you'll watch as the user grabs each of these items, puts it in, let's go back a slide if you could. As they grab the items and put it in front of the beam, it only reads it when it's in front of the beam. It's not getting any misreads. And what's particularly interesting here is you notice in the back, there's a metal spray can, an aerosol can that's made of metal. There's also a metal packet right in front of that. Neither one of these, a pouch, neither one of these cause the reader to reflect off and read the other tags that are nearby. So now this is shot at our warehouse, so there's some distracting sounds in the background, but you can see on the screen when it reads them, and you can hear a beep if you listen for it. If you could hit play for us there, Michael, thank you. Some oil there as well. So you can see how useful this could be, particularly in a cluttered area.
Like reverse logistics. This is actually a fairly clean table, but when I've been into quite a few DCs in my RFID career, distribution centers, and that reverse logistics where they're like managing returns. Man, those workstations are just packed full of.
It can be crazy.
There's just product everywhere. Yeah, so that's really great.
If you could go to the next slide for us, Michael. All right, and so this is a very short example of showing, okay, so now we've got all these liquids in bottles that are packed in cartons. Now you need to put the cartons on the pallet for pickup. This is showing someone using the Reco hand again, which again has that 2 centimeter read range. Notice as the individual grabs the box, it reads it the moment he grabs the box. So it's not that two-step, grab the box, scan it, put it on the pallet. It's as you grab the box, you're reading it and you're putting it on the pallet. So this is an example of pallet building. It's just a 20-second video again in our warehouse there. And the screen will show as the individual picks up the boxes too. So you can see it read there on the left. A little hard to hear the beeps in this one. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. Yeah. So very simple, but the whole workflow here is just as you grab it, you're reading it, not the two-step process.
Yeah, I actually had a great story around this. I was at a major beauty supplier DC, their distribution center, and we were kind of doing this for their pilot. We're actually looking at implementing this. And so the VP of supply chain came out, was observing us and kind of getting a feel for what we're doing. And he's like, I want to try it. So he slaps the glove on and he starts building. First, he's kind of started out kind of slow, and they were like, just go full speed, just go at it. I think his background, he actually started with this. He's like, yeah, this is what I used to do many years ago. So he just started just doing it and like beep, 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 just building and actually associating those cartridges to that pallet in real time as he was building the pallet. So
that's a good sign. How many pallets did he build?
We built over the course of the day, probably 12 or 15 pounds.
Nice. That's good. Getting the VP with the glove on this.
Yeah, it was, and we kind of, by doing this, we were able to get away from, what I kind of grew up with, if you will, in our RFID world, is this whole idea of like, you do this at a shrink wrap station, right? So you build these pallets, then you move it over to a shrink wrap, and then we have an fixed RFID reader there. And that certainly has some challenges, right? And you might not get all the cartons on there. You have to really kind of blast RFID, RF, if you will.
Mhm.
And so this concept of using the right tool for the right job, kind of being a good RF neighbor. So with electrical engineering background, I'm all about knowing, like, if you don't need to, you want to be a good RF neighbor, you know. So
Right.
if you don't need to blast a bunch of RF energy out there to do a job, it's best you don't, because you may be interfering with another workspace or another operation, right?
Keep that short range.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, if you could, our last slide, and this has a nice video made for us by University of Memphis Auto ID Labs from the great Dr. Kevin Brismo. We are so appreciative of it, and if you could hit play for us. Shrinking here that's going through a heat tunnel.
And we actually took the sides off to just kind of see it. Normally there'd be walls of hiding on top. That's the heat elements.
All right, and that is our time, but I do want to mention, so that video, if you go back and look at it later, there's an explanation at the bottom, but we took the sides off the heating elements so you could see as the bands were being shrunk on. And also, please take note that these could be pre-encoded or they could be encoded on the fly.
Yeah.
So they are set up for that, and they are all Gen 2X compliant as well. Yeah. So.
Yep.
Right on. I don't think we even have time for questions, Michael, but thank you so much. We'd be happy.
We have several questions, and I will definitely let the audience get those answers. So I'll follow up with you guys post show, but really do appreciate the presentation. And again, appreciate everyone submitting comments. We will answer those.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.